You did the slime mold search. Please.
I knew there was going to be something weird today.
Oh,
My advice to people, just start. Just do it. Just start doing it. Like doing it, like Barbara said, doing it every day, showing up and doing it every day. Well, like it's like now I have 4 podcasts.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tom School of Life Weekly Update. I'm your community director, Kevin Dolan. I'm joined here by David Moore, Jeremy Evans, and Barbara Williams, your facilitators, and also Brian O'Leary, who's a School of Life member who's accomplished some pretty cool stuff in the group. And so we want to have him on to talk about what he's been working on. So welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Kevin.
Why don't you tell us sort of let's start with what you were anticipating coming into the group and what you were hoping to accomplish
in the Tom Woods School of Life.
That's right.
Yeah. I've listened to all Tom's podcasts and read a lot of his stuff, and I thought it'd be great just to, because he was really looking forward to launching this School of Life, and it's going to be good for all the people, the Tom Woods people. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm a Tom Woods person, so it's going to be good for me. And so I joined, and the webinars were neat, and I was making time to go to every webinar on like whatever Tuesday nights or however, and they were pretty regular at the beginning and still are actually. But I thought that was like it. That was like Tom, his people telling us how to live a better life. And this is great. It's worth my money. And then sometime within that, I think he had a couple of you guys on his show. And then like, he's like, I need to do something like what they're doing. And so I'm like, yeah, that's neat. So I listened to the show, and then, in the forums and stuff, there was kind of, like, yeah, we're going to get this going, and these accountability groups, entrepreneurship groups. And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I don't really know what I can get out of it, but it sounds cool. So I think signed up, and I got put into Jeremy's group on one night, and there was like 20 people or 25 people. I mean, it was insane, like how many people there were. And we had an hour and a half. Everybody got to tell their story. Some people knew each other. I didn't say a peep. I was like the last one. He's like, we've gone over a half hour, so we can't like next time maybe. And I'm like, okay, well and then we had the one-on-one things, and I told Jeremy my story, and he's like, all right, here we go. Let's get a plan going. And
well, what is your story?
So the story is that I started in May or June of 2020 during the Corona lockdown. I started a sports podcast with a buddy of mine, thinking like, we gotta do something. We're in our houses most of the time, and and we're into sports, and we love sports, and so we're gonna do a sports podcast. But there's no sports. There's like cornhole, right? ESPN has live cornhole, and then our first sports podcast, we talked about the match with Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. That was the only other sports thing on. But then, we started talking about different things, and it worked out. It worked out great. And we did it once a week, and it got to the point where I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of like, maybe put up a website and get a few people to sign up for an email list. I ended up getting like 6 people. And I didn't pay attention to it because I didn't email them. But then I started in earnest doing email marketing. I'm like, maybe I should use like these. This is like fast forward another year and a half. Started to send out emails to folks, and got that going. Affiliate marketing, just kind of the whole Tom Woods thing. I'm like, I'm a follower of Tom, so we're going to do what Tom does, and we're going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. But hasn't quite happened yet. Anyway, so we get into the last summer, I guess it was. And I'm in Jeremy's group, and we have the one-on-one. He's like, all right, here, what you need to do is you're going to be an influencer. And I'm like, oh, good grief. I don't know if I want to be an influencer, but Anyway, so he's like,
You do.
Yeah.
But it turns out you do.
May I defend myself briefly? All right. My strongest memory of Brian early on, this is like late at night, right? I think it's
7 p.m.
It's
Pacific.
8 p.m. for me. It's 10 p.m. Yeah, he's Pacific. Anyway, Tom comes in on the call. You remember this?
Yeah.
Right.
I do.
Tom graced our call briefly, and Brian's
he was a member. He was a member that probably he was just like one of us that time. So it's like, all right,
he was just hanging out, and but then Brian goes, but Brian was not necessarily that happy, right? And Brian was like, well, I'm trying all these things, nothing's working. Everything is just I do this. I've done it every day. I've done everything that I'm supposed to do. And I remember I'm like, oh God, what is Tom thinking about this right now? Right. And we hadn't had the one-on-one yet. And I said very gracefully, I think I pivoted very correctly. The facilitators feel this, right? You know, if Tom came on your call and somebody was not a happy camper, how would you feel? There's a tinge of panic. There's a tinge of concern. And I said, right, well, some of us thought we didn't do the one-on-one just yet. So we don't have like a concrete plan. And we did come up with a fairly concrete plan for ways to kind of simplify your activities, some of which were very scattered. Remove some of the burden by using Substack rather than your own website for literally everything. But this is the beginning. This is Act 1, right?
This is Act 1.
There's no immediate success here. Anyway, I'm going to duck out now. But yes,
So I keep on going, right? You're right. So at the beginning of this whole thing, I'm still writing. I'm writing every day. I'm trying to write emails like Tom does, but I get to this point where I'm writing too long of emails. I know Tom like has long and short, and my emails, I'm doing like 1,200 to 2,000 word daily emails, and it's crushing me. Like I can't keep up the pace because I got to come up with something new to say every day. And I'm like, this isn't the way to do it, but I'm going to keep doing it. And so I kept doing it. Substack, and it's on my Substack page. And like, so like you meant before we started talking, Jeremy, you mentioned something about Lou Rockwell. So one of my daily emails made it to the front page of LouRockwell.com. I check my email inbox one morning when I wake up, and I'm like, boom, 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 like, you know, like, subscribe, like all this stuff. I'm like, what in the heck happened? And this is 2 days after 9/11 anniversary, and I'd written a piece on that. And man, I got it just got a lot of new eyes on my stuff, and I'm like, wow, you know, like what I've been doing, like people actually take me seriously. Like there are people out there that take me seriously. So like this reinvigorated me once again. I was going to do it anyway, right? I was just going to keep banging my head into the concrete wall. But this like gave me a little hope that this is actually happening. So then by this time I've switched into a group with Barbara because it worked for my time better. Sorry, Jeremy. But so Barbara ultimately asked me at some point, she says, so what do you like doing? Because, well, let me backtrack. When I was still in Jeremy's group, I'm like, I'm going to start podcasting again. I don't know about what, but I'm going to start podcasting. All right. Next week I come in, I'm like, all right, I did a podcast. And I did a video podcast kind of in this room. I just basically read an email that I wrote. And I'm like, Jeremy, can you come on, be my first guest? Like, and then the group was like, well, what's your podcast going to be about? I'm like, well, okay, here's the deal, guys. This is off the top of my head. I said, I'm going to have 100 of you people on my show. They're like 100 of the Tom Woods people. I want Tom Woods people's stories on my show, and that's what my show is going to be about. So like I don't really know, I'm just going to sit down and you guys are going to be the show. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. Well, Jeremy's my first guest, and Barbara was on a little later, and I've had people reached out to me, I've reached out to them. All right, we've got like 20 people so far, somewhere in there. My shows, I've taken, you know, not only Tom Woods people, but it's primarily Tom Woods School of Life folks. And so, that I'm like, okay, that's cool, but I can only do like a hour-long interview show so often. And then I'm doing all my production, and I'm cutting all the episodes, doing all the show notes, doing all the prep. And, my workflow is like really not working for me. I'm like, because like I can't do it until January. Well, you're booked. You're the next one. Well, I kind of changed that up a little bit and like, all right, whenever people want to come on, then I can release them later. But, when I get into Barbara's group, she's like, well, what do you like doing? Writing or podcasting? I'm like, I love both of them. I just can't keep up the pace writing without going insane. And she's like, well, maybe think about doing more podcasting. And I'm like, I'm a sports podcaster, right? I'm a sports podcaster. And then now I have an interview show. Like change that. I just said, and I looked in my notes the other day. So it was like in November or something. I had scrawled. I'm like, do a daily show. So I do my daily show. It's about 15 minutes to a half hour, pretty much every day. So I don't, my emails essentially write themselves when I write up my show notes, put them on Substack, send them to people. And whatever I'm thinking about and talking about is essentially coming out of my voice. It's not like a daily email that I have to sit down and edit and really go over. Like I'm pretty much a perfectionist, like when it comes down to it. And so that would take me hours per day. And I can, over the course of the day, write my notes and what I'm going to talk about. And I've got to the point where I can knock out a podcast in about an hour. And it's like the 10,000 hour thing though, leading up to it, like learning how to do this quickly and all this jazz. So,
and learning which parts of it are psychologically exhausting.
Oh. Yeah.
I can totally identify with just the pressure to produce a take. It's incredibly.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've ultimately done with this is like, well, I got a podcast every day, fine, but that's an hour out. Like I said, that's an hour out of my day. It's actually more because I'm always on the billing hours, just thinking about things. But sure. I'm like, I gotta help other people like do what I'm doing. We need more of our voices out there, right? We need more people that have something to say. And in these groups, these entrepreneurship groups, people have wonderful things to say. And they just are real. Everybody, it's not everybody, but there's a lot of people like, I need that little push, right? To get over the hump. And we started in our group, talking about podcasting, and like one or two of the other people, like, I want to do a podcast and I don't know how to do it, but I've been a guest on podcasts. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to, saddle up and let's go to town. Here's what we're going to do. And so is my friend Adam Heyman, who's in the group. He's trying to do this podcast with a friend of his, and it wasn't really working out. I'm like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do our own podcast together, because you and I get along pretty well. We can talk things out well. We're not going to maybe not. We'll probably not get in each other's faces about what we think, but we'll see. So we started a podcast called Natural Order Podcast. We've been working on it for 3 months probably, and we had to shift gears a few times, but finally last week we got episodes out, and we've done 3 so far, and they're like, it's crazy better reaction than any of us thought. Like, so we were kind of doing this project. I was doing it kind of make sure I'm doing more podcasting, and he's doing it to, get his feet wet to do this other podcast of his. We're like, well, we like it. We're going to go full force on making this not only our podcast, but our business. We've got products lined up. We've got email campaigns. Speaking of that, I got to send out my emails today. I haven't done that yet, but we've got products. We've got email campaigns. We've got all this stuff lined up. And it was like, this is all, we do like strategy sessions a couple times a week. Like, how are we going to do this and make this more than just a podcast?
It's almost always, people who love to write and talk and share ideas. it almost always has to be associated with some other offering. Like it's really hard to make money just on pure content. You have to really scale up to it to accomplish that.
We started from nothing, right? Nobody knows who we are. I've got a small podcast. He's a co-host on another podcast, but it's like you don't know who we are. And maybe like the few people in the Tom Wood School like know who we are, but not really. I mean, I only know a handful of people in the whole school. So we're starting from nothing, and we're doing very well, surprisingly, or at least from my way I see it.
Yeah, people dig it. And one of the things that stuck out to me about your story is I also can identify with the experience of being in an accountability call and signing up to a commitment because I can't think of anything. I need to think of something to commit to. And sometimes those end up being really, really good ideas. Like it's just what you sort of
nobody else was doing it, right? Nobody else that I knew of in the school at the time anyway had a podcast other than Tom, right? And there might be a few other guests out there or people that I didn't know that are podcasters that are members of the school. I have no idea what the roster of members is, but nobody was doing that. And like, it's going to take Tom forever to get through that roster. Right. And so like, maybe I can help. And it's not my goal necessarily, but like, here's a bunch of people that are getting usage out of Tom's school and they have great stories. Like awesome. You had Darren Mullen on a few weeks ago and I had him on early, and it's like that, like that's a great story, right? The way he went from, corporate saboteur to, now he's a freelance guy with his own book, and, it's just like, it's awesome. And
I can also relate to this, Brian and Kevin as well. You guys talk about something that just comes out of my mouth and all of a sudden it's the plan. I had lunch with a friend last week and I had no idea what we were going to talk about. And all of a sudden I start proposing this idea and it's coming out of my mouth faster than I'm thinking. It's like it's just coming out. And I think there's a real value to just showing up, and getting engaged. And when you see there's a little bit of a lull in the action, just speaking up and saying, let's try something, let's do something. There's that famous Joe Rogan workout motivational video, do something, just get into action. And then as you take action, sometimes the refinements you can make along the way, but you're the one that sort of gets the ball rolling. And then when you have something that's in motion, you can tinker with it.
A lot easier to steer a moving ship.
That's right.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the stuff that Adam and I have been working on it just comes out, right? I have one of the groups I was in. Remember, I think it was Dean. He's like, man, just take a hour long. At the time it was like a 400 day. He's probably like at like 500 or 600 now, but it was like 400 days in a row. He's taking the same. It's either an hour or half hour walk every day. And he's like, and then so much stuff just rushes through my head and I get exercise and so much is going through my head and it's awesome. And so I'm like, well, I walk my dog every day pretty much. And if I don't, if I need to walk longer than that, I do that. And then I get on these calls lately anyway, last week or so with Adam about what we're going to do, how we're going to make this thing go. And I'm walking and I'm thinking, I'm blurting stuff out and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that. And so, I mean, we're on the right track, I think, with this show, but we've only had 3 episodes really. So,
I got a couple things. One, you've done this for a very long time. It's up to you whether or not you want to share numbers and things like this, but you've done, let's say, podcasting as a whole, because there are different lines of business here, right? Different podcasts essentially, but you've done content generation for a very long time. Fundamentally, content generation is an extremely high risk endeavor, right, you have a very high chance of getting exactly nowhere, right? And it's very saturated. There are a lot of libertarian podcasts. There are not that many
we
libertarian
definitely,
listeners.
this is not another libertarian podcast. We made that clear.
Right.
It's more than that. All right.
But there's no concrete data that you can go into content generation of any sort and say, I will definitely make a lot of money and get a lot of followers if I do this. You can approximate, you can try. And what you did, and this is going to be a very brief 60-second description, but we're going to step up our production quality because Liam is currently splicing in a video of a slime mold. You did the slime mold search. And if you've ever seen this, it's a beautiful thing. I have them growing in my backyard in Florida. They will creep along the ground. They look kind of putrid yellow, but they will navigate mazes and they will look for the food, but they don't do it in an intelligent way necessarily. They simply go about in every direction until they get the negative feedback and they prune back that arm. And over here, we have some positive feedback and we grow this arm a little bit further and the other arms have to retract so that we can extend the body towards this one positive little piece of oatmeal. I thought you could also buy these. They're a great science experiment for the kids. And you can train them through a maze towards the oatmeal and they learn over time. They gain memory of the most efficient search strategies, not just in a maze. So they'll proceed through the same maze quite well, but across mazes. And I think that you did something very similar to that. You tried a lot of things. You're still trying a lot of things. And you pruned back. You pruned back workflow that was unproductive, right? Like writing a massive academic essay every day over email. And by the way, Brian is a fantastic copywriter. It was very good copywriting, but it was extraordinarily long. And you got your CBA out of that. And you said, no, the C is a little higher than the B, right? And you pruned back what you couldn't do or what wasn't productive. And with that, you've demonstrated an extraordinary tolerance for rejection, failure, the ability to say, right, this did not work. And that's what separates you from the people that never get to the figures that you're currently at, whether or not you want to share those or not.
Yeah.
Right? You push through persistently, intelligently. Anyway.
I would say the other thing is it's really nice because, I say I want feedback from my show to people, and the best or the most feedback I love it. Go get them. Do more of it. I'm like, it's not that helpful, but
thank you.
When people actually tell me, certain things that I'm doing wrong or they would like to see more of, that's actually pretty helpful. I'm not saying that's not my call to action here today, but it's also like seeing that, but then also outside of my family and friends and people in Tom's school where I really kind of incubated this whole thing. I've got now fans like worldwide, like people are like wrote me a note like, we love you in Brazil. We listen as a group. I'm like, whoa, that's awesome.
So
you got books in the mail. He got books in the mail.
Yeah,
you've made it when people send you books in the mail.
Absolutely.
Review my book.
Yeah. So we're doing that too. And
geez. I do want to point out though, if anybody hasn't looked at Brian's show notes, they are legendary. Like Jeremy said, he wrote an essay every day, really, truly, but like you still do write prolifically. I mean, your show notes are insane, but I love that you fixed
the bigger ones. The bigger ones are for the O'Leary Review podcast, which is my interview show. And, I basically just use all my research that I've done that maybe I didn't, we didn't talk about in the show or whatever, but yeah.
Right. But you improved the workflow because you did the podcasting kind of first and then used that to write. Like I loved how you found what worked better for you. Again, pruning back. I love that slime mold. What? I do need to see a picture of that, Jeremy.
Never seen.
No.
Who's not seen a slime mold?
I have not.
Well, you'll see it when
we'll see. Yeah, exactly.
The post.
But the audience has now seen the slime mold. They love it. They're getting one as a pet. I had one as a pet for about a year before my roommate broke it. She was scared of it because it throbs. It pulsates. You can see it in real time. It's
gross.
Like a fungus that actually.
I knew there was going to be something weird today.
Oh yeah,
quite
count on me, man.
Jeremy.
Oh, it's not done. There will be more.
Ryan, what would you say? What would you say to somebody in school who's on the fence about podcasting, and I think struggling with perfectionism, and oh, this is if I say it on a podcast, it's going to be part of my permanent legacy because it's going to be on YouTube, or it's going to be on a, Apple Podcasts or whatever. And I have to only say things that, I would want my grandchildren to hear, or whatever it is that hold people back from podcasting.
Well, I think that's a great question, number one, because my advice to people, not that I am who I am, but I just say, just start, just do it. Just start doing it.
It's
good
like
story, good story I like to tell people is my very first podcast I did with my friend Tim. We were like, we didn't know much about anything. We got a microphone and like got Audacity to record it on, and like did it over Skype, and like we didn't record it. The first one, we didn't record it, but we did it, and we're like, well, that sucks, but it probably sucked anyway. We'll do a great job the next time, and then we got a rough draft out of it. And so I say, like, and I've done this too. Like I will talk into my microphone for like 15 minutes. Like that stunk. Delete. Like there's no record of it anymore. Delete. And then I did a rough draft.
There are so many steps. Yeah.
Now, if people are afraid of it being on their, the permanent legacy that they leave behind, then it's probably not for them. It's probably not for them. I don't, after the Corona mania and them shutting everybody down and trying to shut everybody up, that invigorated me, man. I say what I want now because that's my show. That's who I am. My tagline is serious content amidst an unserious culture. And I really believe it. We're in an unserious culture, but we're here to provide serious content, whether it's me chatting away for 15 minutes to myself and to the audience. I'm okay with, if I change my mind, I'll go back on the podcast and change my mind. Like, well, hey, you said this back then. And it's like, well, yeah, I did. I don't believe it anymore. Or I did. I do believe it.
Very briefly, I think Brian hinted us the key here because Brian has a superhuman tolerance for dealing with the many frustrations of content marketing in this particular business model where you often fail and you constantly have to readjust, etc. But he said, now I speak my mind. And you can tell if we stare deeply into his eyes, we can tell that that's a very high value for Brian, right? And aligning a personal need that needs to be filled, deeply needs to be filled. And David will be familiar with this in terms of millionaires, billionaires, and the All In podcast. One day we will be the All In podcast, and we're going to get all those guys on here. Oftentimes there's sometimes a void for money amongst the hyper super rich, and they're meeting their own needs and creating, and simultaneously by changing the external world, mending something internally. Or expanding internally, however we want to think about it. I don't care. The fact is, Brian has a deep well of motivation because he found a way to do what he loves. And this is so abstract and so silly, right? But it's not, because this is a guy who dealt with rejection for 2 years.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. It's like people like, oh, how's your podcast doing? I'm like, it's great. I love it. And they're like, oh, that's kind of neat. Because I think people think it's like some activity that I do, or it's some hobby that I spend my time doing. No, I do it all day, every day. That's what I do. That's what I do now. It's essentially my career, like what I've made into my career. I'm not a huge podcaster. I'm not, my name's not out there. It will be, but it's just a matter of like doing it, like Barbara said, doing it every day, showing up and doing it every day. Well, like it's like now I have 4 podcasts. Okay. Well, okay. Like, and I manage all that stuff. Anyway, go ahead.
The question of legacy to me is like, it's like the guy who's like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym because I don't want to get like Schwarzenegger muscles. It's like, don't worry.
Don't go. Yeah. Don't go.
You won't.
Problem.
You won't. Like it's so much friggin' work to get big enough that your legacy matters.
And I want to mention something else as far as that goes too. Like, I don't, like David also said something like, I don't really know if I want to do it or not. Well, there's a woman in the school that Jeremy first introduced me to, who I had on my podcast. Her name is Trista Roberts. She reads children's stories as her podcast, and she's basically she finances it by putting it on fountain.fm, so she earns Bitcoin for her and her daughter to to keep this thing going. And she's like, and I don't know if like I'm doing she's like self-doubt, right? A lot of self-doubt. But like, I put that on my O'Leary Review podcast, put it out there. It is the second biggest show I have had. People are like, I love this. This fits a need. This fits a need. I can play this for my kids. These are awesome stories. And I'm like, that is what we're trying to do here, and then she gets money out of it.
And you probably didn't know. You probably didn't know going in that she would be the most popular thing. It's that slime mold thing. It's just throwing stuff at the wall.
No idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it fits a need, and that podcast fits a need. And I think it reinvigorated her again to get out and do it, once more. She had a little bit of slowdown, but now she's back at it. So
every business has that dark night of the soul.
Yeah.
And every business has deep uncertainty, deep and wide. Right. And Brian was on a call last night. We were talking about exactly this. A guy for the first time trying to do something on his own, and it suddenly becomes work because you don't have faith in the golden city on the hill. Right. It's easy to lose track of that. And you can try to prepare, but the best thing, in my opinion, and who knows, I've only accumulated so much wisdom here, but I think in Brian's case, especially, is having a reservoir, something really intimate, really deeply connected to something like your soul, right? And you tap into that and you say, yes, this sucks. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea if anyone likes it or will ever like it. And I will push.
Right. And my daily show that I do every day, pretty much every day, you're like, what's that about? What's your show about? I'm like, it's whatever I want to talk about. I did a whole week on my study of the Spanish Civil War. Yesterday, I talked about the Jets getting Aaron Rodgers. It goes. That's the spectrum, man. So it's whatever. If I'm reading something that's interesting to me, guess what? I'm gonna make it interesting to the folks out there. And
I tell the guys in my group to catalog their obsessions. To figure out all the things that you think about when you're not having to think about anything. What would you do if you had $500 million? Like, what are you?
I've got baseball. I've got football. I've got conservative politics. I've got,
yeah. And the more that you can find a vocation that circumscribes all of those obsessions, the easier it is to put in the kind of work that you have to put in. Particularly in the content game, but I think in any kind of entrepreneurship, and I will say, just from my perspective, like the self-doubt and this thing that I'm doing, orders of magnitude more successful than I thought it would be.
Yeah,
it's going incredibly well. The self-doubt doesn't go away.
Yeah,
you're
right.
Still,
yeah, no,
you're still always thinking like, is it really good? Is it really going to last? Is it, is the bottom going to fall out? And I think Jeremy's absolutely right that it
can I ask you a question though, Kevin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Does that feeling, even though it's still there, it's spaced out over time more, I imagine. Would that be true?
You definitely have more to disconfirm it with.
Okay. Yeah.
You have more things that you can point to, and you can say, no, this is actually, and you have guys you can call and you can say, hey.
Oh, the networking thing within this school is a huge part. Like, it wouldn't have taken off. It's just like Jeremy kind of get me kickstarted, and then people in the group, and then oh, well, I need to, to some need that I had, I will call him or call her. And so that part of it is a super value for the Tom Woods School. Like, not only these groups, the forums, the webinars, all that stuff, but just the people. And I can't remember who I had on. I think it was Trista who I mentioned, though. And she's like, I was kind of feeling kind of lonely, and then I found out about Tom Woods School of Life kind of thing. I'm like, you found the right club of lonely hearted people here, because nobody likes us, but we like each other. So
it's incredibly lonely to do something that none of your friends are doing. And when you're surrounded by the people at the day job and it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily like not in them to do it, or if they just haven't sort of caught the right vision. But being around people who can't imagine themselves doing the kind of thing that you're doing, that can be very isolating. And so to be in a room full of people who are taking that whack at it is, I kind of think you need it. I don't know how I would do without it.
I would say another factor in why the school works, and it'll be a disagreement with Jeremy a little bit on, like, I know Jeremy's very pessimistic about content creation being a way to make it. And I may be biased because a lot of my closest friends have made it on social media, and that's like a very significant part of their income and the way that they go about things. I think the main trick is that consistency, which again, Brian, you have tons of hard work ethic and all of that. So you're able to do things every week and check in with people who are making sure you are doing things every week or every day or whatever you've promised. In a lot of situations, like, yeah, of course, there's some people who are going to be bad at this. Brian, you're clearly talented also. Like, you need that too. And I'm not discounting that. But so much of it is just showing up and doing it every single day. And I think a lot of people would be shocked at how successful they would be if they just did that.
Not only the reaction, but I don't put a whole lot of stock in the numbers, but even the numbers, like it goes up, like if you show up. Like,
yeah.
It's not hard. It's not hard, but it is hard. Like, showing up's hard for most people.
Yeah. You're creating space for yourself, and you're creating this muscle of being yourself in a very public way. And I think I had a call earlier today with someone, and we talked about, some people will say, I want to do a podcast. And that usually means they want a podcast, but it also might mean they just want to be themselves more often, or paid to be themselves, and be, like Kevin talked about, these obsessions cataloged to where you can kind of go through life and be paid to be the person that you are. And that means sometimes developing skills and adding things. But I think podcast is just a great way to develop network, to develop space, to develop kind of this sovereignty. It's an assertion, really, of I have something to say and I'm worth listening to. And all of the concerns and the worries that other people have, the perfectionism that other people have, I am overcoming it. And I'm overcoming it on display. And I think that's a great example that you're setting.
And on the subject of saturation, actually, I actually just had a conversation with my uncle, who's the founder of Zencastr, which is a podcasting platform.
That's your uncle?
That's my uncle. Kind of a weird coincidence, huh? We started these.
I use Zencastr for my stuff.
Yeah, it's great. It's
maybe
great.
I'll have to talk with you about that offline.
Yeah, Zencastr.com. Full disclosure, I am an investor. So
me too.
Zencastr.com.
He's looking for the promo code. He's like, yeah, Zencastr.
Where's your
50%?
Anyway,
but anyway, no, I'm having this conversation with my uncle, and I'm going to amalgamate two conversations, because he talks about how much of it's like 99, 95, I can't remember what he said, 95, 99% of listens go unmonetized because there's this huge long tail of little podcasts, and it's a huge pain to monetize anything but the biggest podcast. Because like any company that's going to advertise on your podcast, they have to have somebody paid to listen to you and make sure that you're saying things that are on brand and stuff.
That's the thing. And Jeremy and I were actually talking about this last night, where your podcast has to be like you're saying, Kevin, huge in order to, well, relatively,
well, we went over
I know.
ad marketplace. Okay, you're getting
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Well, but
go ahead. Anyway,
well, but the thing about that is like, if what you want is advertisers, tough, really tough.
Right.
If what you want is reach, visibility, that's pretty accessible. And if you have a product of your own that you're trying to get out there, it really it's a lot more of an open field. And I think also it was one of the things that Zencastr is trying to solve is this monetization problem to make it easier for smaller podcasts to monetize. So that's in the works as well. But another thing that he mentioned was like the idea that the market for podcasts is saturated is actually not true.
No,
it's just like writing
about that.
It's just like writing. Good writers are incredibly hard to find, and people will pay through the nose for a really good writer. They want good writing. There's a lot of writing. Most of it's crap, and that's why people say saturated. But like the other thing you have to recognize is like the average podcast listener listens to something like 4 hours a day. 4 hours of content a day. And so they are very quickly going to burn through like anybody's catalog. They got to have like a bunch of, because it's, you got like long haul truckers, you got like security guards, you got people, I mean, when I was working my horrible desk job, I listened to hours and hours and hours of podcasts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of content out there, but
no, I got the idea too.
Demand.
I was a cab driver in Portland, Oregon for like 5-6 years. And I would put my earbuds in or play it over the radio or whatever. And I got a bunch of like, I don't know if Tom Woods was around on his podcast back then, but I certainly remember hearing him.
Well, and I would say the author Ryan Holiday says this: as an author, you're not competing with other authors. You're competing with people who don't read. Like you just are trying to get people to read. And similarly, as a podcaster, don't look at other podcasts as your competition. You just want to get more people to listen to podcasts in general. I think the same thing can apply.
One of the things I want to do, I want more people like us, like me out there, because if they don't like my style, they might like his style or her style. And especially if there's the content I like out there. But I think more people have a voice. They're afraid to get it out. I think for a lot what Jeremy said, or David said earlier, they're afraid of leaving this permanent mark on the record that they said something that they can get canceled for. And it's a legitimate fear. But if you keep your powder dry and have all these systems in place, like I'm trying to develop all these systems in place, so that never happens to me, right? So that will never happen to me again, where I'm in control of what I do. Now, if a podcast company won't host my site again, guess what? Jeremy's probably got some up his sleeve that he can lead me to, or email service, same thing.
Right.
The reason that I'm not bullish on podcasting as a way to make money is because if you don't already have an audience, I think you need about 2 years and extreme persistence.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we're all, just for the listeners out there. Yes, please. No, Barbara disagrees.
No, I'm saying yes. You're
What's
right.
The timeline?
It's not going to happen quickly.
I've worked with a lot, it's the same for SEO. If you want to rank number 1 on Google, you need at least 3 months and you got to give me $6,000. And you could go to the next guy, it's going to be the same deal, but maybe worse, right? Podcasting I want people to understand that there's a price. There's a price. For Brian, immediately when Brian's talking to me, he's in this room, he's wearing these giant headphones, he's got some like boom arm, right? And he starts talking and he's like, well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I knew immediately he wanted to be Tom Woods. And that's exactly what I said. And there's nothing else that's going to scratch that itch for Brian. And that means that he will probably be successful with the persistence and the dark night of the soul and the incredible discipline and trying to figure out all these technical things, et cetera, et cetera. And
you have to want it bad enough.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
get
It's
that.
not. Yeah. So is this the fastest route to passive income? No.
Is that the goal? You know, like, is that the goal? Really?
I'm trying to make the like systems.
Yes.
So like the podcast it's one thing I do, and it's a way to get my voice out, and it's a way to get more people on my train, whatever that is. It's different. It's content. It's different products I can push toward you, whatever. But you just go to briandO'Leary.com to sign up for that email list.
briandO'Leary.com.
Look at this guy. We didn't even have to ask. Keep it up, man. You have like 15 more URLs to give out.
Okay.
You can go there. That's a clearinghouse.
Great.
Okay.
briandO'Leary.com. briandO'Leary.com. So well, we got to wrap here, I think. But this is a great conversation, Brian, and it's great to see you succeeding, and glad you're having such a good experience in the group. And so check out briandO'Leary.com.
Are there any other URLs that you want to plug?
Yeah, anything else we should send people to?
Yeah.
Well, learning from the great Tom Woods, you're only supposed to give out one.
That's
Oh.
correct.
Okay.
So I will give out briandO'Leary.com. However, I will also kind of like nudge you over to naturalorderpodcast.com, but you can find that on briandO'Leary.com.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. This was fun.